I'm Madeline Blair, and I'm going to maybe throw a curveball at you because we've been talking about learning. Francisco, thank you. I thought about when it was that I finally discovered how to learn, because we don't teach our children how to learn. When you get to college, maybe they teach you how to learn. And finally, when you get into the PhD program, then, boy, you better learn, because then you have to also create knowledge. So I just want to just pass that on to you and let you comment, because now what we're asking is, oh, all these staff members who've grown up in the system, we're asking them to learn as well as share.
And to learn very differently.
Yes.
Denise, can I share a case study real quick? Yeah. I heard Michael's story probably, I think 2004, about asking the executives.
He's very kind. He's very kind.
For their ledger of assets. And I want to comment, I want to tie what Jim was talking about and then what Dean's been talking about and what Frank Calabrese was talking about. We reached out, there were 3 of us, we had 14,000 people in our community that were going to use our knowledge assets. And so how does 3 people even begin? In fact, we were told it was impossible. But we broke it down into pieces and we found natural organizations that were already there. So people were doing the work, so this wasn't new work. We're just bringing them to a new level of awareness about the work. Then we had the executives, because this wasn't a community, these were teams, because they had an objective if you use Stan's definition of teams versus communities. So this wasn't people that wanted to be together, these were people that were organizationally together, they were given a business objective. And they were domain specific. There were door from General Motors previously. There were door people and bumper people and wheel people and so on and so on. And they identified what we called a knowledge asset manager. Now those 3 words had a particular reason. We wanted to impress upon the company that knowledge was an asset. So we put that in the title, and people didn't want to be called coaches because they were afraid those jobs would go away. But to be called a manager, now this was a bump up because they weren't really managers and we were really abusing the word in GM's organizational structure. But the worker guys and gals that were the experts in their teams, they grabbed a hold of those words. So knowledge asset manager became our specialist. And when I heard this idea about what's your asset ledger, we created a learning process, not for people. This is my big pet peeve. How does a company learn? All the people go away. This asset that Michael's talking about should still be there. And a new set of people could come in with their tacit knowledge and leverage and innovate off of that those assets. So each of these teams, and there were 250 of them, is that right? No, 250 experts. There were about 33. Yeah, I guess there were 250 teams. Because some of the centers would break up into 10 teams. So you'd have the door hinge and the door pin and the door handle. They were all part of the door community. They actually created their ledgers. And we broke that intellectual capital ledger down into 3 areas. It was know-how, intellectual properties, and then we added intellectual exchanges. So those are the natural forums that people would exchange information in. So when anything was learned that was new in the company, any new knowledge that was created from a study or from outside research, or a lesson, the prevention to a lesson, something that went wrong and was corrected, they would bring those back to the appropriate communities. And because they had a ledger, they could go through and say, oh, this needs to be fixed, and that needs to be fixed, and this needs to be fixed. And they were actually managing what I would call it was enterprise learning. So all the things we've been talking about are not theoretical. They have been applied, and they do absolutely work. And then on the plus side, the knowledge asset managers, because they had these roles that included report back to management on some of these things, some of the folks were able to parlay that into promotions for themselves because they were in the consciousness of management. because they're facilitating all of these activities within their community. So some of the folks were really able to take advantage of the situation and add it onto the resume. So there's a lot of upside to all of this. Just wanted to share that with you.
Steve, is that still in effect, or does it
Yeah,
change?
thanks. I retired from General Motors in 2008, and I'm quite excited to say, as the company went through bankruptcy and back out of bankruptcy, everything that we had put in place stayed in place. The level of use, the 14,000 engineers, about 10,000 now. Those best practices have been used and applied over 1 million times. So it's in that learning process I talked about. It's still there, still functioning. Quite excited about it. The thing that they had last done in the last year, the rules that were in the database were passive. They were there to go get. They've now turned them into active rules, and they're actually put into the workflow. So that when an engineer logs in the morning, they're working on their design, the rules are appearing in their math data. And so it's absolutely 100% being used every single day across the globe. But for it to still be active without the three of us there is pretty amazing.
I want to also add on, without being boring, another case study with Northrop Grumman. As you know, one of my initiatives has always been, we need to come up with names that are universal, because like Boeing has, I don't know how many countries, 24,000 partners around the world. Like an international pilot, you only give them a dictionary of 90 English words, like take off, land, don't sleep, or something like that. We did a dissertation on this, and I'll make it available to everyone. Andreas Andreo went out to Northrop Grumman to come up with a template to facilitate naming these assets, because if you don't name it, you don't own it. You don't have a name for it. And we have SIC codes for everything we do. That's how we keep track of our GDP, which we know is not the best macro indicator, but it's one we all agree on. So we went out to Northrop Grumman, who was supporting Lockheed, and Patrice is here from Lockheed. You ought to pick her brain, because she's the knowledge strategist at Lockheed at the corporate level. But we went out there, and they were doing the upgrade on the FNA-18. So this is not just about automobiles, this is about planes. I guess if we had trains in here, we could have planes, automobiles, and whatever. And they were also doing the new strike fighter, the F-35, which is the next generation of high-performance fighter. So we went out there, and they have Phil, can't remember his name, but he was a PhD, and he was their asset manager. And we worked with him. We said, I'm only talking human capital now. I'm not talking organizational and relationship, which are often overlooked, which represent probably 70% of your knowledge assets, but only on human capital. We began to come up with a template to facilitate their naming their assets. Because everyone says, well, I'm an aerospace designer. Well, that doesn't help me. Do you design the wing? Do you design the engine? Do you design the ejection seat? I need to know that. And so we started coming up with a template at the strategic, operational, and tactical level to come up with a template to facilitate naming in any industry. And it took us a semester. He got his doctorate out of it. A little convoluted, like most PhDs, you know, they live in these ivory towers. But I think the endorsement of the senior vice president, general manager, that said, this is the first time I have ever had transparency on my human capital assets. And as a result, he can check input, process, output, the contributions a little better, not 100%, because we all know knowledge workers, it's hard to define what productivity means except through the output or the results. So, but he had a better name for them, and everyone else recognized how much they were worth. Because most of us, like Carlo Odell says, if you only knew what we know, or Luke Platt from Hewlett Packard, if we only knew what we know, we would be 3 times as more profitable. He used the dirty word, profitable, return on assets. So that's another case study. We have a lot of templates on it. We've come up with the idea, you gotta name them, because if you don't name them, like gravity, you don't own it. You can't work with it. So that's my song, okay? And I back up with Steve, because that's how I got to know Steve too. I was impressed that he and Carla were doing, they were asset managers. So we got to get away from all this other stuff, which is well advanced and matured. That's the complexity of KM. And we really got to start focusing in on the A, B, and C of the alphabet. And I belong, you may or may not know, I'm a charter member of the New Club of Paris. We're in our 6th year. We're trying to come up with a financial accounting standards international. Baruch Lev is part of the team. He's beginning to work on, I know you're laughing, but give the guy credit. Who else is tackling this in a serious way? Now he's working on organizational capital because that's probably one of the least understood aspects. And I got stories on that, but I'll save it for another day. Thank you, Denise.
So let me, I'd like to actually put a question out as a result of this discussion. Oh, sorry.
I'd actually like to throw out a different question because I think the discussion is, let me do a very good point. Maybe the question, what are the roles and responsibilities